In a bustling city filled with skyscrapers and dreams, there lived a man who had worked tirelessly to build his empire. This wasn't just any businessman. This was someone who had climbed mountains most people didn't even dare to look at. Born into a modest family in a small neighborhood, he grew up watching his parents stretch every dollar to make ends meet. But from an early age, he knew deep down that he wanted more, not just for himself but for his community. His journey started with nothing but determination. He spent nights studying under dim lights, working odd jobs during the day to support his education. His big break came when he founded a tech company out of his tiny apartment. At first, it was just him and a laptop trying to solve problems no one else seemed to care about. But as his ideas took shape, so did his success. Over time, his little startup transformed into a multi-million-dollar business known across the country. Now, years later, this man stood tall as one of the few black CEOs in the tech industry, a field where diversity was still a work in progress. People admired him not only for his brilliance but also for how far he'd come despite all odds. His story inspired many, especially young kids who looked like him and dreamed of making it big someday. On a crisp Monday morning, the CEO decided to visit his local bank branch downtown. It wasn't anything unusual. He needed to withdraw some cash for a real estate deal happening later that week. Dressed casually yet confidently, he walked into the bank feeling like any other customer. Little did he know, this trip would become one of the most unforgettable moments of his life. As he entered the building, the familiar hum of activity greeted him, tellers assisting customers, phones ringing in the background, and the faint smell of fresh coffee wafting through the air. He approached the counter, greeted the teller with a warm smile, and handed over his ID along with the withdrawal slip. "Good morning," he said politely. "I'd like to take out $50,000. The teller glanced at the request and hesitated for a moment before excusing herself to consult her supervisor. That's when things began to shift. A man in a neatly pressed suit appeared beside the teller, a middle-aged guy with slicked-back hair and an authoritative demeanor. He introduced himself as the branch manager and immediately started asking questions. "Are you sure these are your accounts?" the manager asked skeptically, raising an eyebrow. The CEO couldn't believe what he was hearing. He pulled out additional documents to prove his identity, but the manager kept pushing back, questioning everything. Each word felt heavier than the last, chipping away at the CEO's patience. For anyone else, this might have been dismissed as bad service or a rare mistake. But for the CEO, it hit close to home. This wasn't the first time he'd been treated differently because of the color of his skin. Growing up, he'd faced similar situations, people doubting his abilities, underestimating his potential, or simply refusing to see him as an equal. Yet here he was, standing in a bank where he held millions of dollars, being made to feel like he didn't belong. Despite the frustration bubbling inside him, the CEO stayed calm. He answered every question, provided every document they asked for, and waited patiently while the manager dragged the process out unnecessarily. Finally, after nearly 10 minutes of back and forth, the withdrawal was approved, but not without leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. Walking out of the bank, the CEO couldn't shake off the anger simmering beneath the surface. For years, he'd let incidents like this slide, telling himself it wasn't worth the fight. But today felt different. Today, something inside him snapped. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, he realized this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about sending a message, a loud and clear statement that enough was enough. With his mind racing, he pulled out his phone and dialed his chief financial officer. "We're moving all our corporate accounts," he said firmly. When the CFO asked why, he replied, "Because I'm done supporting institutions that treat us this way." And with that decision, the wheels were set in motion for a chain of events that would change everything, for him, for the bank, and for countless others watching closely. The CEO walked into the bank that morning feeling calm and confident. He had been to this branch countless times before, always treated with professionalism because of his standing as a major account holder. But today was different. Something in the air felt off right from the start. As he approached the teller counter, he greeted the young woman behind the glass with a polite smile. "Good morning," he said, sliding his ID and withdrawal slip across the counter. "I'd like to withdraw $50,000. At first, everything seemed normal. The teller nodded, glanced at the request, and began typing on her computer. But then she paused, looked up, and excused herself. She disappeared for a moment, only to return with someone else, a man who clearly held authority. This man introduced himself as the branch manager. His tone was clipped, almost dismissive, as if he already doubted the CEO's intentions. "Can you confirm these are your accounts?" the manager asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. The question caught the CEO off guard. Of course they were his accounts. Why would anyone think otherwise? Still, he didn't argue. Instead, he calmly handed over additional documents: his driver's license, a utility bill in his name, even a letter from his company confirming his identity. Yet none of it seemed to satisfy the manager. "I'm sorry," the manager said, leaning against the counter with an air of superiority. "We need to verify further before we can process such a large withdrawal." The CEO stared at him, trying to keep his composure. Inside, though, he could feel his blood boiling. This wasn't just slow service or a minor inconvenience. It was something deeper, something uglier. He knew exactly what was happening here. It wasn't about the money or the paperwork. It was about the color of his skin. For years, he had faced moments like this. Moments when people assumed he didn't belong. Moments when they questioned his capabilities or his worth simply because of how he looked. Growing up, he had learned to swallow those feelings, to push past them and focus on proving himself. But now, standing in this bank where he had millions of dollars deposited, being treated like a suspicious character, he couldn't ignore it anymore. Every second that ticked by felt heavier than the last. The manager kept asking questions, each one more invasive than the previous. "Are you sure this is for personal use?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Do you have any proof of why you need this amount today?" The CEO clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. He explained patiently that the money was for a real estate transaction, something completely legitimate. But the manager didn't seem convinced. Meanwhile, other customers waiting in line began to notice the delay. Some glanced curiously, while others whispered among themselves. The CEO could feel their eyes on him, judging silently. Was he causing trouble? Did he look guilty? The thought made his stomach churn. Here he was, a successful businessman, a respected figure in his industry, reduced to defending himself over something as basic as withdrawing his own money. Finally, after nearly 10 agonizing minutes, the manager relented. With a reluctant sigh, he processed the withdrawal and handed over the cash. But the damage was done. The entire interaction left the CEO feeling humiliated, angry, and disrespected. Walking away from the counter, he couldn't help but replay the conversation in his mind. Every word, every glance, every condescending tone, it all added up to something far bigger than just bad customer service. Outside the bank, the CEO took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He leaned against the wall for a moment, letting the cool breeze wash over him, but the anger inside refused to fade. For so long, he had chosen to overlook incidents like this, telling himself it wasn't worth the fight. After all, he had achieved incredible success despite the obstacles. Why let something like this bring him down? But today was different. Today, he realized staying silent wasn't an option anymore. Too many people had gone through similar experiences. Too many lives had been affected by this kind of discrimination. If he didn't speak up now, who would? And if he didn't act, nothing would change. With determination burning in his chest, the CEO pulled out his phone. He dialed his chief financial officer, someone he trusted deeply. "Get ready to move all our corporate accounts," he said, firmly. "We're done with Sterling National Bank." His voice carried no room for argument. The CFO hesitated for a moment, surprised by the sudden decision, but quickly understood the gravity of the situation. "Consider it done," she replied. 9 minutes after leaving the bank, the CEO returned, this time with a purpose. He wasn't alone either. 2 members of his legal team accompanied him, their expressions serious and focused. Together, they marched straight to the branch manager's office, ignoring the startled looks from employees around them. Without wasting a moment, the CEO placed a formal letter on the manager's desk. It was a termination notice not just for the company's accounts, but for the manager himself. "You're fired," the CEO said coldly, his voice steady and unwavering. The room fell silent. The manager's face turned pale as he stammered, trying to defend himself. But the CEO cut him off. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about holding institutions accountable for the way they treat people." Word spread quickly within the bank. Employees gathered in hushed groups, whispering about what had just happened. Some admired the CEO's boldness, while others feared the repercussions. By the end of the day, news of the incident reached the media, sparking debates online and offline. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags calling for justice and reform. People shared their own stories of discrimination, flooding comment sections with outrage and support. For the CEO, this was only the beginning. He knew firing one manager wouldn't fix the problem overnight, but it was a step, a powerful statement that sent shockwaves through the banking industry. More importantly, it gave hope to countless others who had faced similar injustices. They saw someone standing up, refusing to be silenced, and demanding change. As the days passed, the fallout grew larger. Customers started closing their accounts, en masse putting pressure on Sterling National Bank to address the issue publicly. Shareholders panicked as the stock price plummeted, forcing the bank's leadership to take drastic measures. Apologies were issued, promises were made, and investigations were launched. But the CEO knew better than to trust empty words. What mattered most to him was the ripple effect. Inspired by the overwhelming response, he decided to channel the EO momentum into something meaningful. He announced plans to launch a nonprofit organization aimed at addressing financial discrimination and empowering minority entrepreneurs. It wasn't just about fighting back. It was about building a future where no one else would have to endure what he went through. Looking back, the CEO realized that stepping foot into that bank that morning had changed everything. What started as a routine errand turned into a defining moment, not just for him, but for everyone watching. And as he stood there, surrounded by supporters and critics alike, he knew one thing for certain. True power lies not in wealth or titles, but in the courage to demand justice. The CEO's decision to fire the branch manager sent shockwaves through the bank and beyond. It wasn't just about one person losing their job. It was a bold move that challenged an entire system. People everywhere were talking about it. Socially, media exploded with reactions, opinions, and stories from others who had faced similar discrimination. The incident became more than just a news story. It turned into a symbol of resistance against systemic bias. Within hours of the confrontation, at the bank, the CEO posted a detailed account of what happened online. He didn't hold back. In his post, he described every moment: the dismissive tone, the unnecessary questions, the humiliation he felt when his identity was questioned despite presenting all required documents. His words resonated deeply because they were raw and honest. He didn't sugarcoat anything. Instead, he laid bare the reality of what it meant to be treated unfairly simply because of the color of your skin. "I walked into that bank as a customer," he wrote, "but I was treated like a suspect. This isn't just my story. It's the story of millions of people who face this kind of treatment every single day." The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people shared his post, flooding the comments section with messages of support. Some shared their own experiences, stories of being denied loans, questioned excessively, or even turned away from banks despite having legitimate accounts. Others expressed gratitude for someone finally speaking up. For many, the CEO's actions gave them hope. They saw him not just as a successful businessman, but as someone willing to stand up for what was right. But not everyone agreed. Critics quickly emerged, accusing him of overreacting or using the situation for publicity. Some argued that the bank manager might have been following standard protocol, while others dismissed the incident as a misunderstanding. The CEO read these comments too, but they didn't shake him. If anything, They fueled his resolve. He knew firsthand how easy it was for people to downplay discrimination, to brush it off as a rare mistake rather than part of a larger pattern. Determined to keep the momentum going, the CEO decided to take things a step further. He announced plans to file a formal complaint against Sterling National Bank, calling for an investigation into their practices. He also hinted at exploring legal action, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unjustly by the institution. This wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. He wanted answers, transparency, and real change. Meanwhile, Sterling National Bank scrambled to contain the fallout. News of the incident dominated headlines, damaging the bank's reputation almost instantly. Customers began closing their accounts in droves, some out of solidarity with the CEO, others out of distrust for the bank's leadership. Shareholders panicked as the stock price plummeted, wiping out millions in value overnight. Employees whispered nervously in hallways, unsure of what would happen next. Desperate to salvage its image, the bank issued a public apology. In a carefully worded statement, they acknowledged the incident and promised to review internal policies. But the apology rang hollow to most people. Words on paper couldn't undo years of discriminatory practices. The public demanded more. Real action, not empty promises. For the CEO, the pressure mounted. Reporters hounded him for interviews, eager to hear his side of the story. Activists reached out, asking him to join campaigns aimed at reforming the financial industry. Friends and colleagues urged him to slow down, warning him that taking on such a powerful institution could backfire. But he refused to back down. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about setting an example, showing others that standing up for justice was worth the risk. As the days turned into weeks, the ripple effects of his actions became clearer. Sterling National Bank wasn't the only institution facing scrutiny. Other banks started receiving complaints from customers who had long harbored grievances but never spoken up. Conversations about racial bias in finance gained traction, sparking debates in boardrooms and living rooms alike. Lawmakers began discussing potential reforms, while advocacy groups pushed for stricter regulations to ensure fair treatment for all. Inspired by the overwhelming response, the CEO decided to channel the energy into something meaningful. He announced the launch of a nonprofit organization dedicated to addressing financial discrimination and empowering minority entrepreneurs. The initiative would focus on 3 key areas: education, advocacy, and funding. Through workshops and mentorship programs, it would teach underserved communities how to navigate the financial system. By partnering with policymakers, it would push for legislative changes to hold institutions accountable. And by providing grants and low-interest loans, it would help aspiring entrepreneurs turn their ideas into reality. The announcement drew widespread praise. Donations poured in from supporters across the country, eager to contribute to the cause. Corporate sponsors lined up to partner with the initiative, recognizing its potential to drive positive change. Even some employees at Sterling National Bank reached out privately, thanking the CEO for shining a light on issues they had witnessed but felt powerless to address. Despite the progress, the journey was far from over. The CEO knew that systemic change wouldn't happen overnight. There would be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that staying silent wasn't an option. Every time he thought about giving up, he remembered the countless faces behind the stories he had heard. People who had been denied opportunities, disrespected, or dismissed simply because of who they were. One evening, as he sat in his office, reflecting on everything that had transpired, he received a message from a young woman. She introduced herself as a college student studying business and thanked him for inspiring her to pursue her dreams. "I've always wanted to start my own company," she wrote, "but I never thought it was possible for someone like me. Seeing you stand up against injustice gives me hope." Her words stayed with him long after he replied. They reminded him why he had chosen this path in the first place. It wasn't just about making money or building a legacy. It was about creating opportunities for others, about leaving the world better than he found it. As the weeks went by, the CEO continued to push forward. He gave interviews, attended rallies, and met with leaders in various industries to discuss ways to promote diversity and inclusion. Each step brought new challenges, but also new allies. Together, they worked toward a future where no one would have to endure the indignities he had faced. Looking back, the CEO realized that firing the branch manager wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. What started as a personal affront had grown into a movement, one that showed no signs of slowing down. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he felt a deep sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone who believed in a fairer, more equitable world. The fallout from the CEO's bold actions didn't stop at social media posts or public apologies. It spiraled into something much bigger, shaking the very foundation of Sterling National Bank and forcing people across industries to confront uncomfortable truths. The pressure mounted daily, both on the bank and on the CEO himself. But for him, this wasn't about personal revenge. It was about accountability, respect, and creating a future where no one else would have to endure what he went through. Sterling National Bank quickly realized they were in over their heads. Customers weren't just upset, they were leaving in droves. Lines formed outside branches as account holders demanded to close their accounts. Many cited the CEO's story as their reason for walking away. "If this is how they treat someone with millions in their accounts," one customer said during an interview, "what chance do the rest of us have?" Others shared similar sentiments, pointing out that loyalty meant nothing if it came at the cost of dignity. Shareholders panicked as the stock price continued its downward spiral. Investors called emergency meetings, demanding answers from top executives. Behind closed doors, tensions ran high. Some board members argued that firing the branch manager hadn't been enough, that sweeping changes were needed to restore trust. Others resisted, claiming the backlash was temporary and would die down eventually. But the CEO's relentless advocacy ensured that wouldn't happen anytime soon. In response to the mounting criticism, Sterling National Bank announced a series of reforms. They held a televised press conference, inviting reporters and stakeholders to hear their plan. The bank's CEO took the stage, visibly nervous but determined to present a united front. "We are deeply sorry for what happened," he began, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "This incident has exposed flaws within our system, and we are committed to fixing them." He outlined several steps the bank planned to take: mandatory diversity training for all employees, the creation of an anti-discrimination task force, and the dismissal of senior executives implicated in fostering a toxic culture. The announcement drew mixed reactions. Some praised the bank for taking responsibility, while others dismissed the measures as too little, too late. Critics pointed out that these kinds of promises had been made before and broken just as quickly. For the fired branch manager, life became unbearable. Once a symbol of authority, he now found himself ostracized by colleagues and ridiculed online. Interviews revealed a troubling pattern of behavior during his tenure. Complaints from minority customers ignored, promotions denied without explanation, and derogatory remarks made behind closed doors. His name became synonymous with institutional racism, tarnishing not only his reputation but also the bank's image further. While Sterling National Bank scrambled to recover, the CEO remained focused on the bigger picture. He understood that holding one institution accountable wasn't enough. The entire financial sector needed reform. Inspired by the overwhelming support he received, he doubled down on his nonprofit initiative, pouring resources into programs aimed at empowering underserved communities. Workshops teaching financial literacy attracted hundreds of participants eager to learn how to navigate the banking system. Mentorship programs connected aspiring entrepreneurs with seasoned professionals, willing to guide them through the challenges of starting a business. One of the most impactful aspects of the initiative was its funding arm. Through partnerships with ethical financial institutions, the nonprofit provided grants and low-interest loans to minority-owned businesses struggling to secure capital. For many recipients, this support was life-changing. A young woman running A small catering company used the funds to expand her operations, hiring additional staff and purchasing equipment she couldn't afford before. A father-son duo opened a tech repair shop in their neighborhood, creating jobs and offering affordable services to residents who previously had to travel miles for help. The success stories poured in, each one reinforcing the CEO's belief that change was possible. But it wasn't just about money, it was about restoring faith. People who had once felt excluded from the financial system now saw themselves as part of it. They felt seen, valued, and empowered to dream bigger than ever before. Despite the progress, the journey wasn't without challenges. Critics continued to question the CEO's motives, accusing him of using the incident for publicity or political gain. Others argued that systemic racism couldn't be solved overnight and warned against expecting immediate results. But the CEO refused to let negativity derail him. Every time doubt crept in, he reminded himself why he started this fight in the first place, to create opportunities for those who had been overlooked for far too long. One evening, as he prepared for another round of interviews, he received a message from a man in his 50s. The man introduced himself as a lifelong entrepreneur who had faced countless rejections from banks unwilling to take a chance on him. "Your story gave me hope," he wrote. "I finally got approved for a loan last week, thanks to your program. I can't thank you enough." Reading those words brought tears to the CEO's eyes. Moments like these reminded him that every effort mattered, no matter how small it seemed. As the months passed, the movement gained momentum. Lawmakers began drafting legislation aimed at addressing financial discrimination, inspired by the conversations, sparked by the CEO's actions. Advocacy groups organized rallies demanding transparency and fairness in lending practices. Even competitors in the banking industry started reviewing their policies, fearful of facing similar scrutiny. Through it all, the CEO stayed grounded. He knew the work was far from over. There would always be resistance, setbacks, and moments of frustration. But he also knew that staying silent wasn't an option, not when so many lives depended on speaking up. Each victory, no matter how small, fueled his determination to keep pushing forward. Looking back, he realized that firing the branch manager wasn't just about justice, it was about sparking a revolution. What started as a single act of defiance had grown into a movement, one that showed no signs of slowing down. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he felt a deep sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone who believed in a fairer, more equitable world. The movement sparked by the CEO's bold actions didn't just fade away, it grew stronger with each passing day. What started as a personal stand against discrimination evolved into a nationwide conversation about fairness, accountability, and systemic change. People from all walks of life joined the cause, inspired by the courage of one man who refused to stay silent. But for the CEO, this wasn't just about being a hero. It was about making sure no one else had to face the same indignities he endured. Sterling National Bank tried everything to win back public trust. They rolled out flashy advertisements highlighting their new diversity initiatives, held town hall meetings to address customer concerns, and even launched a scholarship program aimed at underrepresented communities. On paper, these efforts looked promising, but skepticism lingered. Many questioned whether the bank's leadership truly understood the depth of the problem or if they were simply trying to save face. "Actions speak louder than words" became a rallying cry among critics, echoing across social media platforms and community forums. Behind the scenes, tensions within the bank reached a boiling point. Employees whispered nervously in break rooms, unsure of what would happen next. Some feared losing their jobs as investigations uncovered decades of discriminatory practices. Others felt torn, wanting to support reform but worried about rocking the boat. Senior executives found themselves walking on eggshells, knowing that any misstep could reignite public outrage. It was clear that Sterling National Bank couldn't go back to business as usual, not after everything that had happened. For the fired branch manager, life took a sharp turn downward. Once respected and feared, he now struggled to find work. His name had become synonymous with racism, making it nearly impossible for him to rebuild his career. Interviews revealed not only his role in the incident with the CEO, but also a long history of biased behavior toward minority customers. Former colleagues came forward with stories of how he dismissed complaints, made derogatory remarks, and actively resisted efforts to diversify the workforce. The more information surfaced, the harder it became for anyone to defend him. Meanwhile, the CEO continued to lead by example. He poured his energy into expanding the nonprofit initiative he had launched, ensuring it reached as many people as possible. Workshops teaching financial literacy became standing-room-only events, drawing participants from all over the country. Entrepreneurs eager to start their own businesses attended mentorship sessions, soaking up advice from seasoned professionals willing to share their expertise. Funding programs provided grants and low-interest loans to minority-owned businesses, helping them grow and thrive in ways they never thought possible. One recipient of the funding was a single mother running a small bakery out of her home. For years, she had dreamed of opening a storefront but couldn't secure a loan despite having a solid business plan. Thanks to the nonprofit support, she finally got the capital she needed. Within months, her bakery became a local favorite, known for its delicious treats and welcoming atmosphere. Another beneficiary was a young man who turned his passion for technology into a thriving repair shop. With the grant money, he hired employees from his neighborhood, providing jobs and affordable services to residents who previously had to travel miles for help. These success stories weren't just heartwarming, they were proof that change was possible. Each victory reinforced the CEO's belief that empowering underserved communities could create a ripple effect, benefiting not just individuals but entire neighborhoods. People who once felt excluded from the financial system now saw themselves as active participants, capable of achieving their dreams with the right resources and opportunities. But the journey wasn't without challenges. Critics continued to question the CEO's motives, accusing him of using the incident for publicity or political gain. Some argued that systemic racism couldn't be solved overnight and warned against expecting immediate results. Others dismissed the nonprofit's efforts as a drop in the ocean, claiming broader societal changes were needed to address the root causes of inequality. Despite the pushback, the CEO remained undeterred. He knew progress wouldn't come easily, but giving up wasn't an option. One evening, as he prepared for another round of interviews, he received a message from a high school teacher. She wrote to thank him for inspiring her students, many of whom came from low-income families. "Your story has shown them that success isn't just for a select few," she said. "It's given them hope that they too can make a difference." Reading her words reminded the CEO why he kept pushing forward. Every time doubt crept in, he thought about those kids, their dreams, their potential, their futures, and it fueled his determination to keep fighting. As the months passed, the movement gained momentum. Lawmakers began drafting legislation aimed at addressing financial discrimination, inspired by the conversations sparked by the CEO's actions. Advocacy groups organized rallies, demanding transparency and fairness in lending practices. Even competitors in the banking industry started reviewing their policies, fearful of facing similar scrutiny. The ripple effects extended far beyond Sterling National Bank, forcing institutions across the country to confront uncomfortable truths about their own practices. Through it all, the CEO stayed grounded. He knew the work was far from over. There would always be resistance, setbacks, and moments of frustration. But he also knew that staying silent wasn't an option, not when so many lives depended on speaking up. Each victory, no matter how small, fueled his determination to keep pushing forward. Looking back, he realized that firing the branch manager wasn't just about justice, it was about sparking a revolution. What started as a single act of defiance had grown into a movement, one that showed no signs of slowing down. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he felt a deep sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone who believed in a fairer, more equitable world. Months had passed since the CEO took his stand against Sterling National Bank, and the impact of his actions continued to ripple through society. What began as a personal moment of defiance had evolved into something much larger, a movement that inspired countless others to demand fairness, accountability, and change. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was one that left an indelible mark on the world. By now, the nonprofit initiative he launched had grown into a powerhouse for positive transformation. It wasn't just about providing funding anymore. It was about creating a support system. Workshops teaching financial literacy attracted people from all backgrounds: students, retirees, single parents, and aspiring entrepreneurs eager to learn how to navigate the often complicated world of banking. These sessions weren't dry lectures either. They were interactive, engaging, and tailored to meet the needs of real people facing real challenges. Participants left feeling empowered, armed with knowledge they could use to build better futures for themselves and their families. The mentorship program became another cornerstone of the initiative. Experienced professionals from various industries volunteered their time to guide newcomers who were trying to break into fields where opportunities had historically been scarce. One participant, a young man with dreams of starting a tech company, credited his mentor for helping him refine his business plan and secure seed funding. "I didn't think anyone would take me seriously," he said during a community event. "But this program proved me wrong. Now I'm running my own business, and I'm hiring other people from my neighborhood." Success stories like these multiplied, each one reinforcing the idea that systemic change was possible when people worked together. Minority-owned businesses flourished under the initiative's support, bringing jobs, innovation, and economic growth to underserved communities. A mother of 3 used her grant money to expand her daycare center, offering affordable childcare options to working parents in her area. A group of friends pooled their resources to open a bookstore focused on diverse authors, becoming a cultural hub for their neighborhood. Every success story added fuel to the fire, inspiring others to believe in their potential. But while progress was undeniable, the CEO knew there was still so much work to be done. Discrimination in the financial sector wasn't isolated to one bank or one incident. It was woven into the fabric of institutions that had existed for centuries. Changing that required more than goodwill. It required persistence, collaboration, and unwavering commitment. That's why he continued to push for broader reforms, partnering with lawmakers, advocacy groups, and ethical businesses to create lasting solutions. Lawmakers across the country began introducing legislation aimed at addressing financial discrimination. Some bills focused on increasing transparency in lending practices, requiring banks to disclose data about loan approvals and denials based on race, gender, and income level. Others sought to establish stricter penalties for institutions found guilty of discriminatory behavior. Advocacy groups rallied behind these efforts, organizing protests, petitions, and awareness campaigns to keep the pressure on decision-makers. Even competitors in the banking industry started taking notice, realizing that ignoring the issue was no longer an option. For Sterling National Bank, the road to recovery remained steep. Despite their public apologies and promises of reform, trust was hard to rebuild. Customers who had closed their accounts showed little interest in returning, and new clients were hesitant to join a bank whose reputation had been tarnished. Internally, tensions persisted as employees grappled with the weight of scrutiny and uncertainty. Senior executives came and went, unable to restore stability. In many ways, the bank served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of what could happen when institutions failed to treat all customers with dignity and respect. As for the fired branch manager, his downfall became a symbol of accountability. Interviews revealed not only his role in the incident with the CEO, but also a pattern of discriminatory behavior that stretched back years. Former colleagues described him as dismissive, condescending, and resistant to change. His story served as a stark example of how unchecked bias could poison entire organizations, harming both employees and customers alike. Despite the challenges, the CEO never lost sight of why he started this fight in the first place. He remembered the countless faces behind the stories he had heard, the single mothers struggling to make ends meet, the young entrepreneurs desperate for a chance, the families denied loans because of where they lived or how they looked. Their voices kept him going, even on days when the weight of the battle felt overwhelming. One evening, As he prepared for yet another speaking engagement, he received a message from a teenager. The boy introduced himself as a high school junior, with big dreams of becoming an engineer. "Your story made me realize I can do anything I set my mind to," he wrote. "Even if people doubt me, I know I have the power to prove them wrong." Reading those words brought tears to the CEO's eyes. Moments like these reminded him that every effort mattered, no matter how small it seemed. Looking back on everything that had transpired, the CEO realized that firing the branch manager wasn't just an act of justice, it was a catalyst for change. What started as a personal affront had grown into a movement, one that showed no signs of slowing down. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he felt a deep sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone who believed in a fairer, more equitable world. At a prestigious awards gala several months later, the CEO stood on stage accepting the Humanitarian Leadership Award. Dressed in a sharp suit, he looked out at the audience, filled with supporters, skeptics, and curious observers. As the applause died down, he took a deep breath and began to speak. "What happened that day at the bank wasn't just about me," he said, his voice steady and clear. "It was about challenging a system that has marginalized too many voices for too long. It was about saying enough is enough. It was about proving that we are stronger together." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "True power doesn't come from wealth or titles. It comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. It comes from believing in the possibility of change even when others say it's impossible. And it comes from knowing that every step forward, no matter how small, brings us closer to a better future." The crowd erupted in applause, but the CEO barely noticed. His mind was already racing ahead, thinking about the next steps, the next battles, the next victories. Because for him, this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning.